We know that in most cases we are at our most vulnerable when we are isolated from people who love us. None of us are safe if our only paid people in our lives, and we are far away from people who care about us. We also know from the joint self-assessment framework that reviews are not happening for everyone and contracts are not being monitored for quality and outcomes. We know times are tough, but it feels like saving money is the priority, not our lives. How can you know that people are safe?
Hi to the panel, I'm Rebecca, if people don't know me, I'm from Chorley. I just want to ask you a couple of questions, but the one that we should talk about these cutbacks we are doing and we're not getting any answers. So how are we supposed to be safe and know that we're going to be all right when there's all these struggles anyway? Yeah. Progress is not quick enough, too much talking and not enough action. More people are stuck inside their own homes or going away, and more people are getting hurt. How do you know what is going on behind closed doors, and what are you going to do to find out? Why are there not more prosecutions?
It's important that if people are being hurt or harmed in any way, shape or form, that we know about it and that we address it. And as Mark said earlier on, it isn't acceptable. But the most important thing is that we try and find out what evidence there is and we deal with it in terms of putting things right again. So we have had some prosecutions, actually, in the last year or two, and I think some of that has been to do with the police's attitude, getting evidence. It's really hard, and I'm embarrassed to say this, it's really hard to get the police to believe people that are more vulnerable to be a strong witness. But actually, why shouldn't people be a strong witness? If something's happened to you and you've got some proof of it, it should be just as acceptable, just as important in the justice system, your statement about something, as anybody else's statement. So we keep working with the police, and we've done a lot of work recently with the police to get them to understand how we can put cases together to give the evidence that's needed when people are hurt, so that prosecutions do take place. And we've probably had more success around things like where people get their money taken away from them, because we can work out how to show how that's been done. It is harder when people get hurt, but all I can say is keep telling us, because that way we can take some action on it.
I agree that justice is not being done for people, especially like what happened at Winterbourne, where 2 years, it was a joke, 6 months community service, and that. If someone did that to someone outside, they get 8 years for it. Why are we different to them? And if I went up and smacked someone right in the face, I'd get done, I'd get jail for it, I'd get a couple of years. So when someone does that to a person with a learning disability, who can't even talk as well, why don't they get 8 years? I always say where's the justice? Because these people get away with it. how many more people are going to get abused before we finally say is, do you know what? It's about time we give these a good few years, and just as now.
I think the point that was just made there is that people should not be treated differently. People should be treated equally. And that's absolutely fundamental. The point around the police, I think they are trying hard to get better at this. I know that, again, a local example, we have the police that are part of our partnership board, and they attend, and the issues of hate crime and things such as that are discussed there, and I think the police are improving. I think it was a conversation I was having with Jason earlier around how we can get the self-advocates to do some of that training for police and to make sure that they understand that personal experience so that when they're out dealing with situations that they get better at it. We've seen that change with domestic abuse. Domestic abuse used to be almost sort of fobbed off as that's just something that's happening at home. And reality is that was something that was happening to predominantly women, but not exclusively, and they were living with that hell. And that's changed. So we know things can change, but sometimes they take time, but you have to keep on at them. The other thing I wanted to mention was there are, again, within your local authorities, or at least they should be, something called the Community Safety Partnership Board. Now, it might be called something else, but again, you've got some of the bosses from the local authority, from health, and from the police sitting on those, and they're responsible to somebody called the Police and Crime Commissioner, who is one of the bosses that looks after the police. So if you can get your voice heard there as well, then things are going to change. So that, I think that's really important. The final one that somebody mentioned around people feeling isolated and if only paid staff are in their lives, that was one of the issues I mentioned earlier about, as we have some really great staff. We have some fantastic people that work in our services. And what we need to make sure, and those people are passengers, they're visitors in your lives. They won't be with you all the time. But we have some fantastic people that work with you. But to make sure that you are engaged within your community, we've got to make sure that people are, again, treating you equally, part of that society, part of that community. You can't commission a community. It comes from the interaction, the way that you work, the way that you live, the way that you talk, and the way that you socialise with people. Thank you.
A very complex issue, obviously, but I suppose one of the things that strikes me is that we mustn't forget that, you know, if Winterburn hadn't happened, we wouldn't know, but it happened. Okay? It takes a catastrophe, seemingly, or something completely beyond the pale that is exposed to national broadcasters before people say it's time to do something, and then very little happens. I think we have to be more robust in thinking that these things are likely to happen in institutions and at times, and they need to be more vigorously policed, both by the police but also by the providers of services. I don't think it's good enough to say, come and talk to us and complain. We should be alert to the possibility that we know it happens, and we know it happens far too much. We need to tackle that. It needs to be seen as a problem that needs proactive intervention. And I work with the police. I'm sympathetic to the notion that police don't see learning disabled people as reliable witnesses, as it was put by one of the panel. But let's be serious about who do they have to go through to get to the person who's been victimised. They have to often go through staff who have a vested interest in making sure that the situation is not made as apparent as it might be. I've come across this myself with what happened to Connor. I think we need to think very strongly about who is allowed to mediate and how are the police empowered. There should be special units, there should be specialist training. There's not enough of that throughout the force. Each force that I work with has specialist units for sexual exploitation of children, for trafficking, for all sorts. They don't have hate crime amongst learning disability people. And it's time we started putting some real power into the police to proactively investigate these and to turn the tables away from it having to be about complaint and articulation, and put it back onto the notion that as a society we are responsible for the safety of all of our people all of the time, rather than when it comes to a catastrophe and we sit around hand-wringing for 3 years and still nothing happens.